Hey everyone, we sent Harper Garvey a few clips of him hucking and asked him to break them down for us in his words. Harper is a longtime New York pony and Empire player, US national and world champion, and he's some of the most amazing deep throws that I've ever seen. Here's an insight into his perspective.
Babbitt's going to be asking a big question here. Comes up with the answer.
In this video, I'm going to talk through a few hucks that I've thrown over the last couple of years, talk a little bit about the situation within the game, the throw itself, and how I thought about the decision at the time and how I think about it now. So generally speaking, throwing hucks is mostly about shot selection. So the things I think about typically is the size of the window, margin for error, how you can make it easiest on the receiver, and really against good defense, most of that calculation is in evaluating the help defense. It's rare that you will have a one-on-one in the deep space, and so it's really frequently at this level you will see someone helping off, and that is often what I'm thinking about when I throw a huck. So looking at the Clapham clip here, you can see that the stack is sort of clumped together, which typically is not a good thing, but it does open up the deep space really well. So Sam actually really likes to make this cut. I get the disc with a really loose mark, and you can see that Sam's person puts his hand up, calling for help, and that's always like a little bit of a good sign from a thrower's perspective. So I understand that if I'm going to throw a backhand here, this window is massive. I just need to make sure that the last back isn't going to help off. And you can see the last back is pretty flat-footed and walking with Ben, and Sam's person is calling for help, and Sam's already got some pace. So there's not much of a shot, assuming the throw is at least decent, for this help defender to catch up. As far as the throw itself, it's not a particularly challenging throw. It's a little bit into the wind, but really just an eye-out backhand out to space. If I remember correctly, that first point had been really long, so I think people were kind of gassed and we were just ready for it to be over, which is sometimes when you see bad decisions, but in this case, worked out.
Break through the dam, which has been the Clapham defense.
All right, now I'm going to talk about pony versus ring. So I think we're seeing a force flick or maybe a force middle here. I see someone taking off, which is not the reason I make this cut, but certainly opens up that space, the break lane, and a lot of playing offense is about knowing what people like, both in terms of catching and throwing. So I know Sean likes to throw this little high lefty backhand, so he slots that in nicely, and then the mark doesn't get all the way around, and I'm able to get a backhand off, which I don't think is expected by the downfield defense. I think the important thing here, what makes this throw somewhat challenging, is that I have to make this decision really quickly. Basically, as soon as I get it, I'm throwing it. And it's like a same, tenth of the field huck or something, which you're really not supposed to do. So this huck, I throw basically down the sideline. I probably stays about 10 yards off the sideline the whole time. There is not a particularly wide margin for error here in terms of the spacing horizontally, but Chris does have a lot of separation. I think because it comes up quick and to the break side, there's not much of a chance for the defender to make up for the space.
The mark just can't recover and take away the huck down that sideline.
All right, I'll now talk about the next clip, which is from the same game. When you are asked to throw deep shots consistently on a club team, a lot of that actually is a mental challenge. Are you able to do it consistently? Are you taking the right looks, even if you miss the last one? So in this case, I'm throwing quite a similar throw, actually. Small upline move, get a short disc. I see someone going deep. Not sure the force here. Looks like it might be similar, but the throw is too far. It's too far for Sean. The primary reason for this is that I end up short arming it by quite a bit because the mark is pretty close. So this is not an uncommon problem for me. As someone who has a little bit of a longer windup on their backhand, I will often have to cut it short because the mark is tight, and so you can see that the throw is just a little bit too far.
And it's incomplete.
All right, now I'm going to talk about pony Sockeye in Colorado. So here you see Sean throw a little around, and Tyler has started his cut from super shallow, and he's not really looking at me. He's just kind of running, and then you see once the throw goes up, or right as the throw goes up, he turns his head. But again, getting back to that idea of help defense, what's really great about this cut is, despite it taking a long time to develop, it allows the thrower a lot of time to see if the help is going to go. So I can see that all the help is flat-footed and no one is really moving in that direction. So again, one-on-one opportunity, to a big receiver, doesn't catch it. Hard to say whose fault that is, but it's pretty rare that you get that opportunity. So we'll often take that shot. That's also in Colorado, so the disc flies super differently at elevation. There should not be major tournaments there, in my opinion, because you see so many turns if people are unable to calibrate their throwing. I got pretty lucky here. I turn the disc a lot in Colorado, but that one almost worked out. I'm going to talk about the Chicago and New York semi-final, I think it is. All right, so here we're seeing a zone from Machine, which is very typical from them. They've gotten quite good at it over the last handful of years. And I think it's not particularly common that people huck against zones. I think the meta at the moment is to kind of play small ball and work it up through them. But some teams like Machine run zones without wind. And so then it's really more just about finding the space. Obviously, it takes a throw for me to find space first. So Sean has to throw a hammer all the way across the field. And that's really the only reason this works. So likely the deep has adjusted based on the side of the field that the disc starts at, which is the far side. And you can see I'm actually pointing for Ben to go before this throw comes up for Sean. And then as soon as it does come up, I think I might have even yelled at him to let Ben know that it was going to come if it made it over to this side. And then sure enough, it did. It's not a crazy throw. Just had to get it there a little bit quickly because you can see the deep help is closing. And it was right on the back line. So it's kind of a small window, but there's not a defender there. So it's a viable look.
A perfect throw to the back corner of the end zone, and Garvey's dime gets Pony on the board.
Same game. This is a really interesting situation. Oftentimes when you're playing at this level, the field feels pretty small, and so you've got to make really quick decisions, and we've already walked through a couple of those. In this situation, I get the disc in the middle of the field, and Alex Thorne is really open. Like, he has 3 steps. He's the shallowest person by far. There's not going to be any help. And I remember thinking this should be a pretty easy throw, but anytime you're thinking about your throw, it's probably not going to work out the way you want it to. Oftentimes the best hucks are thrown in flow, kind of like things are happening. And I'm of the opinion that a good thrower generally will see where they want the disc to go, and then you get it there without thinking. Like, in retrospect, obviously I can talk through a bunch of things, but in the moment, you're not having those thoughts. You're just throwing it where you think it should go and trusting that your body knows what to do. So in this case, I think I've actually already thought about the throw too much. You can see that I take a little step to gather myself, and I give it a half beat before I throw it. And I overthrow Alex by a lot. Wasn't a windy day, just a bad throw and a little bit more time than I'm used to throw that out into space.
First turnover of the game from Pony.
So here we see a zone again, and with the zones, obviously you've got space somewhere. It's just about finding it.
Sort of flexing zone.
In this case, I get a throw out to my wing. I used to always play in the same position, this wing on the left, and Jimmy would play in the wing on the right. And this is a look that I'm pretty used to taking. Typically, the way that we play against the zone is we have these 2 people on the wings. This is our old formation. We have these 2 people on the wings, and then we'll have 1 or 2 people kind of stretching deep and moving that singular deep defender around. So when Jimmy or I are not involved in the play, we're spending a lot of time evaluating the positioning of the deep as it's compared to our deep receivers. So in this case, Ben Jagt, who's on the same side of the field as I am, has pulled, I think it's Brett, over towards him, meaning that there's a bunch of space by Chris. So this is not a super easy throw, and it actually ends up being just out of bounds, but it's only possible because Ben has pulled Brett deep enough, and then Chris goes and finds a space in the back.
Called out by the observer.
All right, this is also chain pony. Here you can see we're coming off of a dead disc, and hucking off a dead disc start is usually a little bit riskier because everyone has a chance to set up exactly as they'd like. We're running some sort of play for Jimmy to go deep, looks like off the front of the stack. At the beginning I talked about knowing your receiver. Jimmy prefers the disc high in the air than he does too far out in front of him. And I know that. I mean, it's a bad throw, but you want to have a sense of how you want to miss. You know, if you're going to miss a throw, do you want to miss too far? Do you want to miss too high? And you calibrate that based on the preference and strength of the receiver. In this case, I throw this pretty late. Of course, the first thing I'm doing is checking to see if there's a help defender, and if there is, where this person might be playing. So ideally, I should throw this about a second earlier, but because that person that's guarding the back of the stack is kind of waiting off of that first undercut. Ideally, that first undercut happens a little earlier, so the back of the stack deep help commits their hips to the underspace. But you can see here that person does a pretty good job of staying in the space. And so while I'm able to kind of curl the throw over to Jimmy's side of the field, the weak side in this case, it's already too late and it's a little bit windy. And this is a good deep defender. And so Jimmy's asked to do a very challenging task, which is to go up over someone from a standstill on an underthrown throw. He's done it, but he doesn't do it here, and I don't blame him. It's just a bad decision.
Batted away at the last second.
This is another instance of help defense impacting a throw. Here you can see I go up line, and Sam peels off into the deep space, and he has this person beat kind of in the same little lane of the field that I'm in as the thrower. And you can see that deep help, which I think is Pardo actually, shuffles like 2 or 3 steps to the right to get in Sam's way to make that look a little bit less enticing. And Jeff recognizes that instantly and starts to jog away from him. And then I just put the hammer out into space. It's not particularly hard throw. I think the hammer's pretty underutilized in Frisbee. I think we'll continue to see more hammers, but it's really on Jeff here, the recognition to go find that space, and then it's a super easy throw.
Babbitt hauls in the hammer from Harper Garvey.
So in this clip, I get centered to a few yards inside of our own end zone, and we've probably run a play for Yacht to go deep. Yacht is an exceptional deep receiver, probably one of the best ever. And so this is really just kind of a trust throw. As a thrower, you want to do what you can to make it as easy as possible on the receiver, but sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do. So I really just throw it about as far as I can and hope that Yacht's able to get under it. He reads it well and kind of draws his defender directly under the disc, and then at the last minute breaks to adjust. A little bit of IO, throw as hard as you can, see what happens. He made a good play.
Put his body into Yacht. There's nothing he can do when it's up there. And
Hucks are a really important part of the game. I think they open up the field a lot and they force the defense to adjust, even if not to deep throws. The unders become easier and things like that. So ultimately, it's really about probabilities, and great huckers are first and foremost well-calibrated decision makers. There's lots of things to consider: conditions, receiver preferences, margin for error, and importantly, help defense. You can also consider how you're feeling as a thrower, the reality of the game. Is it a tight game? Is it a big game? However, I think that great throwers tend to be really good at tuning those things out. You see that in Frisbee, you see it in basketball, soccer, in any sport that involves some sort of finesse decision making. But anyone can be an effective deep thrower. I think once you've got the throws down, everything else really is the fun part.
Making the catch is Yacht for the score.